Okay, now you are welcome back, and we want to look at class and ID. Classes and ID. Now, class and ID is a tag you use to color or style specific elements. Like take for instance, you can see that our A here inherited the color of our anchor tag here. This anchor tag inherited the color of this anchor tag. Now, how do we make that not to happen? How do we now give a different color to this anchor tag? That is what classes and ID does for you. Okay, that's what class and ID does for you. So I'm going to come to this anchor tag and add a class and say class. Remember, this class will always be inside the opening tag and not inside the closing tag. Okay, so now this anchor tag, I have added a class, and I will say second A. Okay, let me say second. Okay, let me just make it easier. Let me say link 2. Okay, so link 2 is now giving a particular class. Is now giving a particular class to this. So if I come here, in as much as this anchor tag has inherited the color of this first tag which we styled here, now we can come here and declare that class and style that class in particular. So how do we identify a class? We use a dot. Take note, when you are talking about a class, use a dot to identify that class. You don't just write it normally, you must put a dot first, and I will say link 2. All right, I will say link 2, and then I will say let the color of that link 2 be orange. All right, now let's go and view. Do you see that the first anchor tag is now having red, while the second one is having the color of orange? And we can also change that background, the background of that link 2, and say background color, let it be white. Do you observe something? So because this is black already, this is white already, the background is white already, you can't see the black. But if you add the border to it, you will now see. Let's say border. Let's say the border should be solid of 3 pixel and blue. All right, let's see what happens. You can see now. That's it. So this is how to work on specific elements. Okay, this is how to work on specific elements. So this, you can use a class to work on elements, but normally a class is for a group of elements. That's why it's called a class. A class is when you want to put a group, you want to make elements to be in a group. So let me take for instance, you want to make a box, and you want that all your boxes should be having the same color. So instead of coming to style each box every time, you simply declare a class, and I will say that class is box. Okay, that class is box. It means that any other box you create and give that class, it will have that color that you gave. But now when you want to work on elements more specifically, you use what we call ID. ID is very important, and ID is very, very important for creating a one-page website. It's something we call a one-page website. I don't know whether I've visited a website where you click on something, and what it does, it did not take you to any link. It simply scrolled you down or up to a particular section of that website. Is because that particular section of that website has an ID. So that button you clicked is not a button, is not a hyper button. It's called internal link. It is a link pointing to a particular section inside that website, and that is what we use to create a one-page website in which every content is at one place, but then you can use links to reference to all of them, so that a user does not have to scroll until he gets to that point. He simply click on something, and the browser will scroll him or her up to that particular section that has that particular ID. So okay, we can also work on ID on this. Now we can also change this class to ID. We can also okay, let me use ID to work on the first tag. Okay, so I will say ID. and I'll give it ID of link 1. Okay, as we go on, you will see the difference between links, and you will see the difference between class and ID. They look the same, but I prefer, just know that ID is more specific than class. When you are talking of class, we are trying to, a group of elements. You want to give a class to a group of elements, but if it is an ID, it is always good that you make it to be for a particular element. You don't need to give that ID to any other element, but you can give different elements the same class. I hope you understand now. An ID is always meant for a particular element. That is how it should be. But then a class, you can give a particular class to different elements, so that those elements in that class will have a particular type of style. But an ID is when you are trying to style a specific element more. Meanwhile, why this thing is like this, why we declare this class and give this color, you observe that any other tag that we declare, any other anchor tag we declare and give it this class of link 2, we automatically inherit this link 2 styles. Okay, that is just it. Now I put an ID of link 1, and how do you declare an ID? That using the ID selector. The ID selector is hash, not dot. Okay, so take note, to declare a normal element without class or anything, you write it normally. To declare a class, you use a dot, but to declare an ID, you use an hash. So I will say link 1. Okay, I will say link 1, and then I will give it a color as well. I'll give it a color as well, and I will say let's call it indigo. Okay, so if you go to this thing now, you see that, do you observe what happened? Do you observe what happened? The color is now indigo. Maybe that indigo looks like blue. Let's use something that will be more obvious. Let's use something that will be more obvious, so that you will understand. Okay, now let's see. You can see it's red. So I think the color was red before initially. Let's use green. Yeah, let's use green. You can see that. You see it now. That means that in order of priority, IDs and class supersede the normal elements in styling. So in as much as we have given our anchor tag, which is this and this are all anchor tags, and we said each color should be red, but you can see that we have altered the color by giving them class and ID. That is how it works. So ID is for specific element, class is for group of elements that you want to give a particular styling. So even if we remove this color, here, you can see that they still remain the way they are. Nothing has changed, because the ID and the class is of a higher priority than the element itself. Okay, so if we remove this background, it will alter it, because we have not added any background to our link 1 and our link 2. So it will still be carrying the background of that anchor tag. But now if we remove the background, you will see that it will alter it. The backgrounds will leave. Okay, the background will leave, but you can see that this background did not leave, because we added a background to it. We added a background to our link 2. Do you see? We added a background color to our link 2, which is why. So if we add a background color of red to this one, you can see that the background color will turn to red. So that is about ID and class. So as you are working on our website, you'll be seeing some of these things. You'll be seeing me putting these things, so that you will not be lost about what I'm doing. You will know exactly what I am doing. So that is about ID and class. So the next thing we're going to talk about is div tags, and that will be in the next video. Thank you.